Welcome back to the deep dive. So you've brought us a source today that it's less of a simple list and more like a detailed map of workplace hazards.
It really is. We're looking at a huge stack of sources that outline 101 different toolbox talk topics.
101. And these are the things that safety pros are looking at, what, every single day?
Exactly. For a bit of context, a toolbox talk is basically a quick, focused safety meeting. It's meant to get workers ready for the dangers they might face before they even start their shift.
Okay, so our mission today is to give you, the listener, the ultimate shortcut. We're going to try and distill the most surprising, the most critical nuggets from all 101 of these topics.
Right.
We want to get you past just hard hats and high-vis vests and into the real breadth of what these professionals manage.
And when you look at a list this big, you start to see patterns. The risks, they naturally cluster into about three major themes.
And what are those?
So first, we'll look at the immediate dangers, the physical and operational threats. Then we'll get into the slower, more invisible stuff, environmental and health risks.
And the third.
And finally, the big one, the systemic and behavioral factors, the human element that kind of underpins everything else.
Okay, let's start with the high-stakes stuff then. The acute dangers you'd find on a construction site or in a factory. I'm guessing falls are still at the top of the list.
Year after year, falls from height are consistently one of the biggest killers in these industries.
And what's the detail that jumps out from the sources?
It's this surprising fact. So many of these fatal incidents happen from heights of less than 4 meters.
Less than 4 meters. Wow. That totally shifts the narrative, doesn't it?
It does.
It's not about the person working on a skyscraper. It could just be a momentary slip on a low scaffold or even a ladder.
Exactly. And it's not always falling off an edge. The sources point to specific things like building shafts and open holes. They're just silent traps. You see them in demolition, roadworks, construction, and people fall through them all the time.
So if that's the hazard, what's the control? I mean, we know about guardrails, but the sources really seem to emphasize safety nets. What's the key detail there?
The key thing with the safety net is that it's not just about catching someone. The setup is everything.
How so?
You have to have enough clear space below it. If there isn't enough room, the person could still hit the ground or a structure underneath before the net has a chance to fully stretch and absorb the impact.
So the net becomes useless if the physics aren't right.
The physics have to be perfect. All that energy has to go somewhere, and space is what allows that to happen safely.
Okay, let's move from the structure to the tools.
Yeah.
Angle grinders. Most people just think, wear goggles, but the risks are way broader.
Way broader. You've got noise, dust, entanglement,
But the really severe ones.
or kickback. That's where the wheel snags and just violently throws the tool back at you. And the absolute worst case scenario is a burst disc.
Which is when the wheel itself just shatters.
It shatters, and suddenly you've got shrapnel flying at incredible speeds. That's a catastrophic failure.
And then you have heavy vehicles, forklifts. Operator training is obviously key, but the sources seem to hammer home a different point.
They do. They really focus on the non-operators, the people walking around the forklift.
Their responsibility.
To be acutely aware of the machine's blind spots, it shifts the focus. It's not just on the driver. If you're the one on foot, you have a duty to be alert, to make eye contact, and to stay out of those zones.
Right. And just to quickly round this section out, a word on the simple stuff, machine guards.
The simplest barrier. They're just there to physically stop you from touching dangerous moving parts. They prevent crushed fingers, cuts, amputations.
They're the definition of passive safety.
They are the simple barrier between you and a machine designed to cut things very, very fast.
Now, here's a transition that always catches me off guard when I look at these lists. The sources actually quote that, for some people, the most dangerous thing they do all day
Is the drive to and from work.
is the drive to and from work. That's why defensive driving is on the list.
It connects your home life to your professional risk profile. And of course, that risk is made so much worse by distracted driving.
Phones.
Phones. The advice in the source is blunt. It just says, leave your phone alone until you reach your destination. It doesn't care if you're in a company truck or your own car. Your attention is the only control that matters.
And that actually sets us up perfectly for the next section, where things get a lot more insidious. We're talking about the invisible killers.
Right. The risks that don't announce themselves with a loud bang, they build up over time, or they're impossible to detect with your senses.
What's terrifying here is that the deadliest things are often the ones you can't see, smell, or taste.
No sensory warning at all.
Let's start with a big one. Hydrogen sulfide, H2S.
Extremely flammable, highly toxic when you inhale it, and it comes from a couple of places. It occurs naturally in things like petroleum and natural gas, but it's also produced when bacteria break down waste. Think sewage treatment, confined spaces.
And then you have its cousins, the inert gases,
Hmm.
things like nitrogen or argon. They seem safe, right? They don't burn, they don't
So
explode.
you feel safe.
Go
But
Tom.
their danger is it's all about displacement.
Give us an analogy for that.
Yeah.
Because that mechanism of harm is so important to understand.
Okay. Imagine pouring water into a glass. The water fills the glass and the air that was inside has to go somewhere, right? Gets pushed out.
Right.
Inert gas does the exact same thing to oxygen in a poorly ventilated space, like a tank or a pit. You can take a breath and you feel like you're breathing normally, but you're actually inhaling a gas that has shoved all the oxygen out of the room.
So you asphyxiate without even realizing it.
Instantly. It's why atmospheric monitoring is it's non-negotiable in those situations.
Okay, from invisible gases to microscopic solids. Let's talk about dust, specifically silica dust. The mechanism here is horrifying.
It really is. The sources describe the particles as tiny, microscopic blades of glass.
And when you breathe them in,
They create tiny little cuts all over the inside of your lungs. Over time, that leads to scarring. And that scarring is an incurable disease called silicosis.
so how much is too much? What's the safe exposure level?
And here's the critical point from the sources for any professional listening. There isn't one. It says any level of silica exposure can potentially lead to silicosis.
So the goal is always elimination, not just reduction.
Always. You wet it down, you use powerful ventilation. You can't negotiate with a hazard like that.
And we can't talk about lethal dust without mentioning asbestos. We all know the history, but the sources remind us it's a carcinogen for the lungs, but also the intestines, the throat, even the ovaries.
It's one of those historical threats that is still incredibly relevant today, especially in demolition or renovation work on older buildings.
And finally, for this section, let's touch on the biological side. Legionella. How does a water system become a killer?
It's all about the conditions. Water systems like cooling towers or even large hot water tanks, if they sit at that sort of lukewarm temperature,
The perfect breeding ground.
it's a perfect breeding ground for the bacteria. And when that water gets aerosolized, turned into a mist, you can breathe it in, and that leads to Legionnaire's disease.
Wow. And just to round out the environment, we have the obvious seasonal stuff, right? Frostbite on one end.
Yep, cheeks, ears, nose, hands, feet. And on the flip side, heat stress, sunburn, heat stroke, which is all about managing hydration and work schedules.
Okay, so that brings us to section 3. We've done the immediate physical dangers. We've done the invisible chemical threats. Now we get to the layer that controls it all, the systemic layer. Procedures, people, paperwork.
And this section really starts with getting your definition straight.
Yeah.
The sources are very clear in distinguishing between a hazard assessment,
Which is just
Hmm.
identifying the danger.
right, spotting the hazard, and a risk assessment, which is the crucial next step. That's where you actually figure out the controls you need to put in place to eliminate or minimize that hazard. They're two different essential steps.
And for the really high-risk jobs, you have permits to work. That's the big administrative checkpoint, isn't it?
It's the final gate. A permit to work is basically the formal sign-off that says, yes, every single control measure, from locking out energy sources to testing the air, has been physically done before anyone is allowed to start the job.
It forces deliberation over instinct.
Exactly.
And speaking of formal processes, what about dangerous occurrences or notifiable events? These are things you legally have to report.
Yes, and the source material specifically mentions this part is based on New Zealand law, where you'd report to WorkSafe.
But the universal takeaway.
The takeaway for everyone listening, no matter where you are, is that you have to know your local jurisdiction. The rules for reporting an incident in mining are different from aviation, are different from construction, and failing to report is a massive violation in itself.
Okay, now we get into the psychology of it all, which is maybe the most fascinating part.
Yep.
Let's talk about near misses. That was a close call moment.
The sources call a near miss a gift. It's free information.
A gift. How so?
Because it points you directly to a flaw in your system, but nobody got hurt. So you have this perfect opportunity to learn a lesson with zero cost,
But the human tendency is to just shrug it off and get back to work.
which is the worst thing you can do. Because that same hazard is almost guaranteed to injure someone later if you don't fix the underlying cause. It was a dry run for a disaster.
And let's talk about the pressure workers are under. The material makes a really clear distinction between challenge, which is good,
Right. Challenge is motivating. It pushes you.
And stress, which is dangerous.
Very dangerous. Stress is what happens when the challenge goes past your ability to cope. It drives poor decisions, you lose productivity, and worse, people get hurt or killed.
Which leads right into this concept of presenteeism. We all know about absenteeism, not showing up. But this is the opposite problem.
This is the danger of showing up when you shouldn't.
Like when you're sick.
Or exhausted. Or you're completely distracted by a personal issue at home. You might be physically there, but your mind isn't on the job. Your judgment is impaired, and you become a hazard to yourself and to everyone on your team.
And that ties directly into fatigue management. This isn't just about being a little tired, is it?
No, fatigue is a state of exhaustion. It reduces your reaction time, increases your errors, and it builds up over time. It can be work-related, it can be from your personal life, or a mix of both.
And to prevent the physical breakdown, there's ergonomics.
Right. Stretching, proper lifting techniques, limiting exposure to vibration. It's all designed to stop those long-term repetitive motion injuries like carpal tunnel.
It's about making the job fit the human body, not the other way around.
Exactly. If the body breaks down over 10 years, that's still a system failure. It's just a slower one than a grinder disc exploding.
And now, even working from home is on the list of hazards.
It is. From proper workstation setup to the psychological risks of being isolated, it just shows that these 101 hazards, they really do follow us everywhere.
So we've gone from fatal falls of less than 4 meters to invisible gases and all the way to the stress of just showing up to work. It's a huge journey. It really shows how comprehensive safety has to be.
And if you zoom out, all 101 of these topics, they all feed into one single overarching concept. Safety culture.
Define that for us.
Safety culture is the product of all the values, attitudes, and behaviors in a group. It's what determines how committed people really are to health and safety, beyond just, ticking the boxes. It's the engine that drives everything.
And that brings us back to people, to human commitment. So for you, our listener, as we wrap this up, here's the provocative thought. If safety culture is the engine, what's the internal threat that can seize it up?
We see the idea of zero harm in these sources, this commitment that all accidents are preventable.
So what undermines that?
The thing that undermines it is workplace complacency.
Complacency.
It's defined as being self-satisfied, while also being completely unaware of the dangers right in front of you. It happens when a job gets repetitive, routine, boring.
Complacency is the hidden hazard. It undercuts every procedure, every permit, every piece of training. That right there might be the final frontier of safety you want to go explore.
It's that constant battle between being conscious and committed versus just getting comfortable with the routine.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll catch you next time.